Okay, quick question before we even say hello properly. Have you ever been sitting in a group of people, everyone talking fast, everyone giving their opinion, and you had a real opinion too, but somehow the words just would not come out?
Oh, I know that feeling completely.
You just sit there nodding, saying, yeah, yeah, totally, when actually inside your head, you were thinking something completely different. And afterward, you walk home, and suddenly, in your own language, you have the perfect sentence. Just 5 hours too late.
5 hours too late is generous for me. Sometimes it takes me a full day.
Today, we're going to fix exactly that problem. By the end of this episode, you are going to know how to jump into a conversation, disagree politely, agree with confidence, and actually sound like yourself in English, not like a nervous student. Welcome back to Rose and Jack Everyday English. We're so happy you're here. I hope yesterday's episode helped you a little bit. Today is day 1 of our 30-day B1 to B2 challenge. And honestly, I think this might be one of my favorite topics we have ever done.
Same here. Today's topic is express your opinions like a native speaker. And by the end of today's episode, you will feel so much more confident sharing what you really think in English, whether you agree, disagree, or you're still somewhere in the middle. Can I go first today? I actually have a story that still makes me a little embarrassed, but I think it will help a lot of people listening right now.
Please go first. I love it when you tell the embarrassing ones.
Okay, so this was maybe 3 years ago. I was living in Toronto doing a short course at the university, and I joined a seminar group with about 10 students, most of them native English speakers. The topic that day was social media and whether it was actually bad for teenagers or not. Everyone had strong opinions, and the professor kept asking, "What do you think, Jack?" And every single time, all I could say was, "I think it's bad," or "I think it's good." That was it. No explanation, no reason, nothing. Just a flat opinion with no color.
I actually love that you say no color, because that is exactly what happens. In our own language, we know how to add feeling. We know how to soften an opinion or make it stronger. But in English, it can feel like we only have one tool, and that tool is just, I think.
Exactly. And that was my real problem. In my head, in Vietnamese, I had a whole argument ready. I wanted to say something like, I understand why people worry about it, but honestly, I think the problem is not social media itself. It's how much time we spend on it. That is a real opinion, with a reason and even a small disagreement inside it. But in English, all of that turned into 3 words. I think it's bad.
So, what happened after the seminar? Did you just let it go or something changed?
Something changed actually, because one of the students, her name was Amanda, she stayed after class and she said something that I never forgot. She said, "You clearly have opinions, Jack. I can see it on your face. You just need the words for it." And she was right. I had the thinking, I just didn't have the English structure to show that thinking.
That's such a kind thing for her to say, honestly. What did you do next? Did you start practicing?
I did. I started writing down small phrases every day. Things like, in my opinion, the way I see it, to be honest, and I get where you're coming from, but, and then I forced myself to use at least one of them every single day, even in small conversations, even if it felt strange at first.
I think that's such a good method because a lot of learners think they need a huge vocabulary list to sound confident. But really, you just need 3 or 4 strong phrases that you can use again and again in different situations.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, 2 weeks later, in the same seminar, the topic was remote learning versus classroom learning. And this time, when the professor asked me directly, I said, to be honest, I'm not so sure remote learning works for everyone. In my opinion, some students need the classroom environment to stay motivated. And Amanda actually turned around and smiled at me, like she noticed the change immediately.
That gives me chills a little bit, honestly, because it shows how fast things can improve once you have the right tools. Not just more grammar rules, but actual usable phrases.
Right, and now I used to be honest almost every day. Sometimes too much, probably.
No, it's a great phrase. And it fits perfectly with what I want to talk about, too, because my story is a little different, but it's about the same fear.
Tell me everything.
So mine happened in London at my cousin's flat. She invited a small group of friends over for dinner, and most of them were British, native speakers, very fast talkers, very confident. And somehow the conversation turned into a big discussion about working from home versus going to the office, which, as you know, is a topic everyone has an opinion about.
Oh, that topic can get heated fast.
It got heated within about 2 minutes. One guy, his name was Oliver, he said something like, "Working from home is just an excuse to be lazy. People get nothing done." And I actually disagreed with him quite strongly because I had worked from home for almost a year and I felt more productive than ever. But instead of saying that, I just laughed a little and said, "Yeah, maybe."
That sounds painfully familiar.
It was painful because inside my head, I had this whole argument ready. I wanted to say, "I see what you mean, but I actually think it depends on the person. Some people work better at home and some people need the structure of an office." That's a complete, reasonable opinion, right? But instead, "Yeah, maybe," came out. And Oliver just moved on to the next person like my opinion didn't even exist.
Did anyone notice that you had more to say?
Actually, yes. My cousin noticed. Later that night, when everyone left, she said, "Rose, you had a whole speech in your eyes back there. Why didn't you say anything?" And I told her honestly. I said I was scared that if I disagreed, it would sound rude or that my grammar would be wrong in front of everyone and they would judge me.
I think every English learner has felt that exact fear at some point. The fear that disagreeing equals being rude.
Exactly. And that's actually the biggest thing I learned from that night. Disagreeing is not rude if you do it the right way. My cousin taught me a phrase that night that changed everything for me. She said, next time, just start with, "I see your point, but," or "That's a fair point. However, I think." Those small phrases protect the conversation. They show respect first, and then you can share your real opinion.
That's such a good tip because a lot of learners think disagreement has to sound aggressive, but really it's mostly about the structure you use before your opinion.
Completely. So 2 weeks later, at another dinner, someone made a similar comment, this time about whether cities are better than small towns to live in, and I actually used it. I said, "I see your point, and I get why some people love the energy of a big city, but honestly, I think small towns give people a better quality of life, especially for families." And you know what happened?
What happened?
The whole table actually turned toward me and started asking follow-up questions. Nobody thought it was rude at all. Actually, they seemed more interested in me because I finally shared a real opinion instead of just agreeing with everything.
That is exactly the shift, right? When you show a real opinion, people actually want to talk to you more, not less.
Exactly. And I think that connects perfectly to what happened with you and Amanda. The moment you added structure to your thinking, people started noticing you more, not less.
True. And honestly, I think a lot of learners are scared of the opposite idea. They think staying quiet is safer, when actually staying quiet can make you invisible in a conversation.
That's such a good way to put it. Can I tell you about the second part of my story too? Because there is more.
Of course, go on.
So after that dinner, I actually had a small disagreement with Oliver again, the same guy from the working from home conversation. This time, the topic was about whether university is necessary for success. And Oliver said something like, "If you don't go to university, you basically limit your future." And I strongly disagreed because I have friends who never went to university and they built amazing careers.
What did you say this time?
This time I felt brave, so I said, "I'm not so sure about that actually. In my opinion, university helps some people, but for others, real experience teaches much more than a classroom ever could." And Oliver actually paused for a second, and then he said, "That's a fair point. I never thought about it that way." Can you imagine? A grown man with a very strong opinion actually stopped and considered mine.
That's such a powerful moment, honestly, because it shows that a respectful disagreement can actually open someone's mind instead of starting an argument.
Exactly. And I think that's the real goal of today's episode, to show people that expressing an opinion in English is not about winning an argument, it's about joining the conversation as an equal, not as someone hiding in the corner.
I love that.
And going back to my story for a second, I think there's one more part I want to share because it actually connects to something you just said about being invisible.
Please go ahead.
So, after that seminar experience in Toronto, I actually kept practicing. But a few months later, something bigger happened. I got invited to a small business meeting, my first real professional meeting in English with people from Canada, Australia, and one manager from Ireland. And the topic was about whether our team should switch to a 4-day work week.
Oh, that's a big topic for a first meeting.
It was huge, and honestly, I almost didn't say anything at all. Everyone was speaking.
Exactly. And I think that connects perfectly to what happened with you and Amanda. The moment you added structure to your thinking, people started noticing you more, not less.
True. And honestly, I think a lot of learners are scared of the opposite idea. They think staying quiet is safer, when actually staying quiet can make you invisible in a conversation.
That's such a good way to put it. Can I tell you about the second part of my story too? Because there is more.
Of course, go on.
So after that dinner, I actually had a small disagreement with Oliver again, the same guy from the working from home conversation. This time, the topic was about whether university is necessary for success. And Oliver said something like, if you don't go to university, you basically limit your future. And I strongly disagreed because I have friends who never went to university and they built amazing careers.
What did you say this time?
This time I felt brave, so I said, I'm not so sure about that actually. In my opinion, university helps some people, but for others, real experience teaches much more than a classroom ever could. And Oliver actually paused for a second, and then he said, that's a fair point. I never thought about it that way. Can you imagine? A grown man with a very strong opinion actually stopped and considered mine.
That's such a powerful moment, honestly, because it shows that a respectful disagreement can actually open someone's mind instead of starting an argument.
Exactly. And I think that's the real goal of today's episode, to show people that expressing an opinion in English is not about winning an argument, it's about joining the conversation as an equal, not as someone hiding in the corner.
I love that. And going back to my story for a second, I think there's one more part I want to share because it actually connects to something you just said about being invisible.
Please go ahead.
So, after that seminar experience in Toronto, I actually kept practicing. But a few months later, something bigger happened. I got invited to a small business meeting, my first real professional meeting in English with people from Canada, Australia, and one manager from Ireland. And the topic was about whether our team should switch to a 4-day work week.
Oh, that's a big topic for a first meeting.
It was huge, and honestly, I almost didn't say anything at all. Everyone was speaking so fast, using words I didn't fully understand. And I remember thinking, maybe I should just stay quiet today and listen. But then I remembered what Amanda told me back in the seminar, that people could already see I had opinions. I just needed the words.
So, did you speak up?
I did, eventually. Near the end of the meeting, the Irish manager asked directly, Jack, what's your opinion on this? And instead of freezing, I used the structure I had been practicing. I said, to be honest, I think a 4-day work week could work really well for creative teams. But I'm not so sure it would work the same way for teams that need to be available for clients every day. It wasn't a perfect sentence, but it was a real opinion with a reason, and even a small doubt inside it.
How did they react?
The Irish manager actually smiled and said, that's a fair point. I never thought about it that way. And then 2 other people jumped in and agreed with parts of what I said. For the first time in a professional meeting, I felt like a real member of the team, not just someone translating in his head and staying silent.
That's such a beautiful moment, honestly, because it shows that confidence in English isn't about perfect grammar. It's about having enough structure to share your real thinking, even if a sentence isn't 100% correct.
Exactly. And I think that connects to something important for our listeners today. A lot of learners wait until their English is perfect before they share an opinion, but the truth is, native speakers make mistakes too. They just keep talking anyway.
That's so true. Actually, that reminds me of something else that happened with my cousin's friend group. A smaller moment, but it taught me something too. There was a woman named Grace, very quiet at first, and one night she disagreed with someone about a movie we all watched together. She said, I get where you're coming from, but honestly, I didn't enjoy the ending at all. It felt rushed to me. And nobody argued with her. They just asked why, and she explained calmly.
What did you learn from watching her do that?
I learned that disagreement can be calm and short. It doesn't need to be a big speech. Sometimes just one sentence with the right structure is enough to join the conversation. I used to think I needed a long, perfect argument every time I wanted to disagree. But really, even a short opinion, said with confidence, is enough.
That's such an important point because I think a lot of learners, including me before, believe they need to prepare a whole speech in their head before speaking. But really, conversations move fast, and a short, clear opinion works better than a long, perfect one that comes 5 minutes too late.
Exactly. Timing matters just as much as grammar. And speaking of timing, I want to share one more small story because I think it shows the opposite side of this topic, which is agreeing, not just disagreeing.
Oh, that's a good point. We've talked mostly about disagreement so far.
Right. So at that same dinner with Oliver and Grace, someone said something I actually completely agreed with. A woman named Priya said, I think traveling alone teaches you more about yourself than traveling with friends ever could. And I felt this strong urge to agree, but I didn't want to just say, yeah, again. So instead, I said, I couldn't agree more, actually. When I traveled alone in Vietnam, I learned to make decisions completely by myself, and it changed how confident I feel in daily life.
I love that you added your own experience instead of just agreeing.
Exactly. And that's something I want listeners to remember, too. Agreeing doesn't mean just saying, I agree. A stronger way to agree is to say, I couldn't agree more, and then add your own small story or reason. It makes the conversation deeper and people feel more connected to you.
That's such a good structure, honestly. I couldn't agree more. And in my experience, it's simple, but it makes you sound so much more natural.
It really does. And I think between your story and mine, there's a clear pattern here for our listeners. Whether you agree or disagree, the secret isn't perfect English. It's having a few strong, flexible phrases ready and having the courage to use them even when your heart is beating a little fast.
Completely agree with that. And honestly, I still get nervous sometimes, even now, but the nervous feeling gets smaller every time I actually speak instead of staying quiet.
Same here. And I think that's the most honest thing we can tell our listeners today. This isn't about becoming fearless overnight. It's about building small habits, one phrase, one honest opinion, one small disagreement at a time, until one day you realize you're not translating anymore. You're just talking.
I really love how this conversation turned out today because it started with two embarrassing stories and it ended with something really useful for anyone listening right now.
Exactly. And I think it's the perfect moment to slow down and actually look closely at the phrases we use naturally today, because there were quite a few good ones.
Before we do that, actually, can I tell you about one more moment? Because I think it shows something a little different, something about disagreeing with someone older, which feels even scarier than disagreeing with a classmate.
Oh, yes, please. That's a really good angle.
So a few months after that business meeting, I visited my uncle in Toronto. And he's someone I really respect. Very traditional, very direct with his opinions. One evening, he said something like, young people today don't want to work hard. They just want an easy life. And honestly, I disagreed with him completely. But disagreeing with someone older, someone in your own family, felt so much harder than disagreeing with a stranger at a seminar.
That makes total sense because there's this cultural pressure too, not just a language pressure.
Exactly, both at the same time. But I remembered the phrases again. So I said, I get where you're coming from, but honestly, I think it's more about different priorities than laziness. A lot of young people just want balance, not an easy life. My uncle went quiet for a second, and then he said, that's actually a fair point. I never thought about it like that. That moment meant so much to me because it wasn't just practice anymore. It was a real connection with someone I love.
That gave me actual goosebumps, honestly, because it shows that these phrases aren't just for classrooms or business meetings. They're for real relationships too, even with family.
Completely. And I think that's something learners forget sometimes.
We practice English for tests or for work. But really, the biggest reward is being able to have real, honest conversations with people we care about, even when we disagree with them.
That's such a beautiful way to end this part of the story, honestly. And it actually makes me think of one more tiny moment from that same dinner group in London, if you don't mind me adding one more.
Please add it. I'm enjoying this too much to stop now.
So, near the end of the night, Grace, the quiet woman I mentioned earlier, she actually asked me directly, Rose, what's your opinion? We haven't heard from you much tonight. And for a second, my old fear came back, that feeling of being watched, being judged. But then I remembered everything from that whole evening, and I just said, honestly, I think this whole conversation shows something interesting. People usually agree more than they think, they just express it differently. Everyone actually paused for a second, and then Oliver said, wow, that's actually really true.
That's such a smart observation, too. Not just a simple opinion, but almost a comment about the whole conversation itself.
Exactly. And that moment taught me something important. Once you build the habit of sharing opinions regularly, you start noticing bigger patterns too, not just small reactions. Your English becomes a tool for real thinking, not just repeating phrases.
I think that's the perfect place to pause, honestly, because we've shared quite a few real moments today, from seminars to business meetings to family dinners and even quiet dinner parties in London.
We really have, and I think our listeners now have several real situations to imagine themselves in. Not just abstract advice, but actual moments where these phrases matter.
Definitely. And now I think it's the perfect time to slow everything down and really look closely at the expressions we use naturally throughout this conversation.
Yes, let's do exactly that, because listeners deserve to see these phrases clearly one more time before we move on to today's common mistakes and practice.
Actually, before we move on, I want to add one very last thought, because I think it ties everything together nicely for anyone still listening closely.
Go for it.
I think the biggest lesson from both of our stories today isn't really about grammar rules at all. It's about permission. We spent so much time believing we needed permission to speak, permission to disagree, permission to have a real opinion in English. But nobody was ever going to give us that permission. We had to give it to ourselves, one small sentence at a time.
That's such a powerful way to say it, honestly. And I think that's exactly what today's listeners need to hear. That confidence doesn't arrive one morning perfectly formed. It grows slowly through small, slightly scary moments, just like the ones we shared today.
Exactly. So if you're listening right now and you've been quiet in conversations, staying safe, just nodding along, I hope today's stories gave you a little push to try something different next time.
I really hope so too. And with that, I think we're finally ready to slow down and look closely at the language itself, all those useful little phrases hiding inside our stories today. One more tiny thing before we do, actually. I just want to say to anyone listening in Asia or Europe right now, driving to work, cooking dinner, or walking somewhere with headphones in, this exact fear we described today, it's universal. It doesn't matter which country you're from or which language you grew up speaking. The fear of sounding wrong in English feels the same everywhere.
That's so true, and I think that's actually comforting in a strange way because it means you're not alone in this. Millions of learners feel exactly what you feel right before speaking up.
Exactly. And that's honestly one of my favorite things about doing this podcast. Everyday English conversation like ours becomes a small mirror for so many different lives around the world.
Beautifully said. Okay, now let's really slow down and break down the language.
Okay, so let's slow everything down now and look closely at the phrases we used naturally in our stories today, because there were quite a few useful ones hiding in there.
Let's start with "in my opinion." This one is simple, but it's powerful because it tells a listener right away that what comes next is your personal view, not a fact. For example, in my opinion, small classes help students learn better than big lecture halls. A common mistake learners make is saying "for my opinion" instead of "in my opinion." Just remember, it's always "in my opinion."
That's such a common mix-up, honestly. Next, let's talk about "to be honest." This phrase prepares the listener for something real, sometimes something a little surprising. For example, To be honest, I don't really enjoy big parties. I prefer small dinners with close friends. A quick tip here: don't overuse it in every single sentence or it loses its power. Save it for the moments that really matter.
Good point. Now, I get where you're coming from, but this is one of my favorites now because it shows respect first before you disagree. For example, I get where you're coming from, but I think working late every night actually hurts productivity, not helps it. A common mistake is forgetting the word but at the end, which changes the whole meaning of the sentence.
Exactly. Without but, it just sounds like full agreement. Next is, that's a fair point. We use this to show that someone made you think, even if you still disagree a little. For example, that's a fair point. I never thought about the cost of childcare before. It's a really natural way to keep a conversation friendly, even during disagreement.
Let's also look at I'm not so sure about that. This is a soft, polite way to disagree, much better than just saying, no, you're wrong. For example, I'm not so sure about that. I think experience matters just as much as a university degree. Notice how it opens the door for more conversation instead of closing it.
And one more important one: I couldn't agree more. This is a strong way to show full agreement, and it sounds much more natural than just saying, I agree. For example, I couldn't agree more. Traveling alone really does teach you independence. A great tip is always to follow it with your own small reason or story, just like we did earlier today.
Let's also mention, I see your point. This shows that you understood the other person clearly before adding your own opinion. For example, I see your point about remote work, but I still think some jobs need face-to-face teamwork. It works really well right before you disagree politely.
And finally, the way I see it. This is another natural way to introduce a personal opinion, slightly softer than in my opinion. For example, the way I see it, confidence in English grows through small daily conversations, not big grammar books. These 8 phrases together give you a complete toolbox for expressing opinions naturally in everyday English conversation.
Now, let's talk about a few common mistakes B1 learners make when expressing opinions in English, because these small errors can really hold you back.
The first mistake is saying I am agree instead of I agree. Many learners translate directly from their own language, but in English, agree is already a verb, so you don't need am. Incorrect: I am agree with you. Correct: I agree with you completely.
Another common mistake is saying, in my opinion, I think. This actually repeats the same idea twice because in my opinion and I think both already show that it's a personal view. Incorrect: in my opinion, I think remote work is better. Correct: just choose one. In my opinion, remote work is better, or I think remote work is better.
A third common mistake is disagreeing too directly, which can sound rude even without bad intentions. Incorrect: you are wrong, that's not true. Correct: I see your point, but I actually think it's a bit different. The second version keeps the conversation warm and respectful, exactly like Grace did at that dinner party.
And one more mistake, forgetting to add a reason after your opinion. Incorrect: I think social media is bad. Correct: I think social media can be harmful because it often affects people's sleep and focus. Adding a short reason instantly makes your English sound more mature and thoughtful.
Okay, now let's actually show you how this works, live, in real time. Jack and I are going to have a completely new short conversation right now on a totally different topic, just so you can hear these phrases used naturally, without any story around them.
I love this idea. Let's pick something fun. How about, do people really need a university degree to be successful?
Perfect. Let's just talk normally, and listeners, pay close attention to the phrases we use.
Okay, so in my opinion, a university degree still matters a lot, especially for certain careers like medicine or engineering. You simply can't become a doctor without years of proper study.
I see your point, and for careers like medicine, I completely agree with you. But honestly, I think for a lot of other jobs like marketing or design, experience matters just as much, sometimes even more than a degree.
That's a fair point, actually. I hadn't thought about creative jobs specifically, but I'm not so sure the same idea applies to more technical fields. Don't you think some structure is still necessary?
I get where you're coming from, but structure doesn't only come from university. Online courses, internships, and mentors can give people that same structure today, especially with how much free information exists now.
I couldn't agree more with that part, honestly. Access to information really has changed everything in the last 10 years.
Exactly. So maybe the real answer is it depends on the career path someone chooses, not one single rule for everyone.
That's such a natural way to end an opinion, honestly. It depends, instead of forcing one hard answer.
See how easy that felt? We used almost every phrase from today's lesson, naturally, in less than 1 minute. That's exactly what we want for you, our listeners. Small opinions, real reasons, and polite disagreement, all working together in one smooth conversation.
So, next time you're in a conversation, whether it's at work, with family, or with friends, try building your opinion the same simple way we just did. Start with a phrase, add your reason, and stay open to the other side.
Now it's your turn, and we would genuinely love to hear from you. Here's today's comment challenge. Think about a topic you feel strongly about. It could be work, travel, food, technology, anything at all.
Then write a comment below using at least 2 phrases from today's episode. For example, you could say, "In my opinion, working from home is better, but I get where people who prefer offices are coming from." Try to use a real opinion plus a small reason, just like we practiced.
We will be reading your comments, and honestly, some of the most interesting conversations on this channel happen right there, in the comments section, between listeners from completely different countries.
So don't be shy. Share your honest opinion. Practice your English speaking, and let's turn the comments section into our own little global conversation.
Thank you, friends, for listening to our today's episode. I hope you learned something from it.
Don't miss tomorrow's episode, Day 2 of the B1 to B2 Challenge. Subscribe now so you don't fall behind. See you tomorrow, friends.